For as long as she could remember, Evelyn had been warned never to fall in love. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning whispered like a ghost story through generations of women in her family. At first, she thought it was just an old wives' tale, a superstition passed down to keep her from heartbreak. But as she grew older, the truth became undeniable. Her mother had never married. Her grandmother had lived alone for most of her life, a shadow of a woman who never spoke of the past. Even her great-grandmother's records were scarce, as if she had been erased from history. Each woman in their bloodline had one thing in common. The moment they gave their heart away, tragedy struck. Some lost their lovers to accidents so cruel they seemed designed by fate. Others watched as their husbands simply walked away, their love inexplicably turning to dust. And then there were the ones whose men simply disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Now, it was Evelyn's turn. She had tried to ignore the warnings, to live a life untouched by the fear that had controlled the women before her. But deep down she knew the curse was real, and if she ever let herself love, she would pay the price. Men disappear, but why? At first, Evelyn thought it was a coincidence. The first man she ever loved, Daniel, left without a word. They were high school sweethearts, the kind of love that made promises of forever. But one night, he went to bed after kissing her goodnight, and by morning he was gone. No note, no farewell, just an empty space where he used to be. The police searched for weeks, but there was nothing to find. Then there was Liam, the man who made her believe in love again. He was kind, steady, the type of man who made her feel safe. But on the night he proposed, he collapsed lifeless before he could even slip the ring onto her finger. A heart attack, they said, but Evelyn knew better. The curse had taken him, just like it had taken all the others. She tried to stay away from love after that. She kept her heart guarded, built walls so high that no man could ever climb them. But fate had other plans. And when she met someone new, someone who refused to be pushed away, she knew she was running out of time. His name was Marcus, and from the moment he walked into her life, everything changed. Unlike the others, he wasn't afraid of her cold exterior, her warnings, or the shadows that followed her every step. If anything, he seemed drawn to them. "If you think some old curse is going to scare me away," he told her one night, his hand warm against hers, "then you don't know me at all." But she did know him. She knew his stubbornness, his unwavering belief that love could conquer anything. And for the first time, she wanted to believe it too. She fought it at first, kept her distance, but the pull was undeniable. When she finally let herself love him, it felt like the universe had been holding its breath, waiting for her to make the wrong move. And then, just as she feared, the curse struck. It started with small things. His car breaking down mysteriously on an empty road, his house catching fire in the middle of the night, shadows moving where there should be none. And then came the worst of all. Marcus woke up one morning, looked at Evelyn, and for a moment he didn't recognize her. It was as if something had started erasing her from his mind, pulling him away inch by inch. But Marcus was different from the others. He fought back, and together, they decided to uncover the truth. The answers came from the most unexpected place, an old, tattered diary buried in her grandmother's attic. The pages were yellowed with time, the ink fading, but the words still held power. "We were in love, but love was not enough. The moment he said the words, the curse took him from me. And I." The rest of the sentence was smudged, as if her grandmother's hands had trembled too much to finish writing. As Evelyn flipped through the pages, she realized something chilling. The curse had not always existed. It had been placed upon their family, woven into their blood like a poison, and it all started with a betrayal. Long ago, one of her ancestors had loved the wrong man, a man already promised to another. A woman, scorned and vengeful, had cursed him to suffer for eternity, to love, but never keep that love. Every woman in their line had paid the price. But now, Evelyn had something the others did not, knowledge. And if curses could be cast, Perhaps they could also be broken. The town had long whispered about old Miss Wren. Some called her a witch, others a healer. But Evelyn knew she was the only person who might understand. She found her deep in the woods, living in a house that smelled of earth and old magic. "You came sooner than I expected," the old woman said, her eyes sharp and knowing. Evelyn hadn't even spoken yet, but somehow Miss Wren already knew why she was there. "You think you can break it," the old woman mused. "Most don't try." Evelyn hesitated. "Can I?" Miss Wren sighed. "Breaking a curse requires more than just knowledge. It requires sacrifice. Are you willing to give up something, someone, to save the rest?" The question burned through her. Could she? Could she risk Marcus, the one man who had stayed? But then she thought of her mother, her grandmother, all the women before her who had suffered alone. "Tell me what I have to do," she whispered. The rituals began that night. Miss Wren led her through ceremonies older than the town itself, rituals that made her feel as though she were stepping through time. And then the dreams started. They weren't hers, but they felt real. She saw her great-grandmother crying in the rain, her love ripped from her arms. She saw her ancestor, the woman who had started it all, begging for forgiveness too late. The curse had been fueled by pain, by loss, by centuries of broken hearts. And now it was feeding on Evelyn. But the vision showed her something else too, an answer buried deep within the past. If she could find the woman who had cast the curse, if she could make her spirit see the suffering she had caused, maybe, just maybe, she could end it. But the town didn't want the curse broken. The deeper Evelyn dug, the more resistance she faced. Some things are better left buried. The mayor told her when she tried to access the town's oldest records. The local priest refused to talk to her, his hands shaking as he pushed her away. Even the kind old librarian, who had always helped her as a child, suddenly turned cold. "Leave it alone, Evelyn," she warned. "This town has kept its secrets for a reason." But Evelyn refused. She broke into the archives at night, scoured old newspapers, traced her lineage back further than anyone ever had. And what she found chilled her to the bone. The curse was not just a family curse. It was a town's curse. The entire town had been complicit in covering up the betrayal that started it all. And if Evelyn exposed the truth, she wouldn't just be fighting against fate. She would be fighting against everyone. In the end, it came down to a single choice: revenge or forgiveness. She had every reason to hate the past, to let the anger consume her. But as she stood before the grave of the woman who had cursed her family, she realized something. The only way to break the cycle was to do what no one else had done: to forgive. The words were hard, bitter on her tongue. But as she spoke them, something shifted. The air felt lighter. The shadows that had haunted her began to fade. And when she returned home that night, Marcus was waiting for her. He knew her. He remembered. And for the first time in generations, the curse was broken. Evelyn had thought the worst was behind her, that the curse had been broken, that she and Marcus could finally be together without the weight of generations pressing down on them. But fate, it seemed, was not done with her yet. One morning, she awoke to find Marcus standing at the window, his face pale, his hands trembling as though he had seen a ghost. "I dreamed of her," he whispered. "The woman who cursed your family. She spoke to me." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "What did she say?" Marcus turned to her, his eyes hollow, haunted. "She said I don't belong to you." The words cut through her like a blade. She had fought so hard, risked everything to break the chains that bound her family. But the curse was more insidious than she had realized. It didn't just take love. It planted doubt. It poisoned the mind. It made even the strongest hearts falter. And now, it was trying to take Marcus from her, not by force, but by making him question everything they had fought for. She grabbed his hands, desperate, pleading. "You do belong to me. We belong to each other." But in his eyes, she saw something she had feared all along: uncertainty. Love had never been enough for the women in her family. and she was beginning to wonder if it ever would be. As the days passed, Marcus became more distant. The nightmares grew worse. He would wake up gasping for air, whispering names Evelyn didn't recognize, speaking in voices that weren't his own. It was as if something or someone was trying to pull him away, to unravel him piece by piece. And then, one night, he was gone. The bed beside her was empty, his phone left on the nightstand, his car still parked in the driveway. No note, no sign of struggle, just emptiness. Desperation clawed at her throat. She searched everywhere. The woods, the town, even the old places where she had first uncovered the truth of her family's curse. But Marcus had vanished, just like the others, just like the curse demanded. It wasn't until she returned to the graveyard, to the place where she had spoken the words of forgiveness, that she understood. The curse had not been broken. It had only been paused. And now, it demanded something in return, a sacrifice, one life for another. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Take me instead," she begged. "Bring him back. Take me." But the curse did not answer. The wind howled through the trees, the ground cold beneath her hands. She had broken the rules, and now she would pay the price. In the days that followed Marcus's disappearance, Evelyn became a ghost of herself. She barely ate, barely slept, barely breathed. The town whispered about her, their eyes full of pity, of fear. But then, something strange happened. A man arrived, tall, dark-haired, with eyes that seemed to hold lifetimes within them. He walked with purpose, with familiarity, as though he had been here before. "You look like someone I used to know," he said when he saw her. Evelyn's heart clenched. There was something in his voice, something that made her want to believe, to hope. But she had been fooled before. "Who are you?" she asked warily. The man tilted his head, studying her. "That's the thing," he murmured. "I'm not sure." And that was when she realized it. His voice, his mannerisms, the way he looked at her, like he was seeing something he couldn't quite grasp. It was Marcus, but not Marcus. It was him, and yet it wasn't. The curse had taken him, twisted him, rewritten him into something new. And now, she had to find a way to bring him back. The curse isn't what it seems. Evelyn had spent her entire life believing the curse was a punishment, a cruel twist of fate that robbed the women in her family of happiness. But as she stood before the stranger who was and wasn't Marcus, she realized the truth was far more terrifying. The curse was not a punishment. It was a prison, and Marcus, along with every man who had ever loved a woman in her family, had been trapped inside it. It wasn't just about stealing love. It was about stealing them, their memories, their identities, their very souls. It explained why some men had disappeared without a trace, why others had turned cold and distant before leaving. They weren't running away. They were being taken. And now, Marcus was one of them. But there was one thing the curse hadn't accounted for: Evelyn's refusal to give up. She would not let it take him. Not this time. Not when she had already lost so much. She had spent so long fighting fate. But now, she realized she needed to change her strategy. If she couldn't break the curse from the outside, she would find a way to break it from within. Desperate for answers, Evelyn turned to the only person who might have known the truth, her mother. She had never spoken much about the curse, always dodging questions, always warning Evelyn to stay away from love. But now, Evelyn needed to know why. She found her mother in the same house she had grown up in, sitting by the window, staring at nothing. "You were right," Evelyn whispered. "Love is dangerous." Her mother turned to her, sadness etched into every line on her face. "I never wanted you to learn that the hard way." Evelyn swallowed the lump in her throat. "But I need to know the truth. How did this really start? And how do I end it?" Her mother hesitated, then reached into a small wooden box, pulling out a faded letter. "This was from your grandmother," she murmured. "She wanted me to give it to you when the time was right." Evelyn unfolded the letter, her hands shaking. The words inside were simple, but they changed everything. Do not fight the curse. Do not run from it. The only way to win is to surrender. The words sent ice through her veins. Surrender? To what? To whom? And what would that even mean? But she didn't have time to hesitate, because the moment she finished reading, the wind outside howled, the house trembled, and she knew the curse was coming for her next. Evelyn had made her decision. If surrendering was the only way to save Marcus, then she would do it. She returned to the place where it all began, the site of the original betrayal, the place where love had first turned to hatred, where the curse had been born. As she stood there, she felt it, the presence, the weight of every soul trapped by the curse. And then she saw them, the lost men, their faces blurred, their eyes hollow, their voices distant echoes of the past. And among them Marcus. He reached for her, his touch cold, his expression blank. "You're not supposed to be here," he whispered. "You have to go." But Evelyn shook her head. "Not without you." The curse tried to pull her away, tried to consume her, but she held on. "I forgive you," she whispered, not just to the spirits, but to the woman who had started it all. "I forgive all of you." The curse howled, twisted, writhed, and then it shattered. When Evelyn opened her eyes, she was back in the real world. The wind had died, the air was still, and Marcus, her Marcus, stood before her whole and real. "Evelyn," his voice was his again, his eyes were filled with love. She threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. It was over. The curse had been broken, and for the first time in generations, love had won.